My name's Amanda Burlingham, and my partner is Sierra Johnson, and we're doing our project on extinction and wildlife. So we first wanted to talk about the global extinction statistics. So we pretty much learned that there is a rapid loss of species, leading between 1,000 and 10,000 times higher than the natural extinction rate. So pretty much it's between 0.01 and 0.1% of all species are going to become extinct within the year. So we were able to see that there are around 2 million different species on our planet, which means that there's going to be around 200 to 2,000 extinctions that are going to start occurring every year. And if there are, in general, if there are about 100 million different species coexisting with us on our planet, then that means around 10,000 to 100,000 species are becoming extinct each year. So pretty much extinction is starting to become one of the biggest issues that we can see, and that's why we did our presentation on this topic. So what drives extinction? So there are three main topics that drive extinction. We have habitat loss, poaching, and climate change. So habitat loss is normally caused by us, the human population. As we continue to grow, we see that the habitats where animals of importance are starting to decrease, so animals are losing their homes in a sense. The second one is poaching. Poaching is considering hunting of a wild animal with intentions to kill and sell the materials from the animal. So normally we see this with like elephants, where elephants' tusks are being ripped out and they're being used for ivory. And the only way that you can get the tusk out of an elephant is by killing it, because the tusk is a part of its skull. And then the pangolins, scales for medical use in China. So the pangolins are pretty much they look like these little armadillos, but they have scales on them, which are used for medicine in China, while they can also consider their meat to be a delicacy. So they use them for two forms. And then the third reason why extinction is happening is due to climate change. We see that animals in certain climates are not adapting to our rising temperature, since there is a temperature increase globally. We normally see this in like the polar bears in the Arctic. They have too much fur or too much body fat to where with these rising temperatures they slowly cannot survive, or the ice caps are melting, so they don't have anywhere to live and stuff like that. So one of the biggest topics that we noticed when we were pretty much looking up all this stuff is about poaching. So poaching really is considered the illegal killing of wildlife. So there are some effects that really happen when it comes to poaching. So it pretty much takes decades for animal populations to recover, because normally with poaching, it just comes with a mass amount of killing of the animal. It actually does affect the protection of the rangers and workers on national park lands, because in places like Africa and stuff like that, where we have all these animals who need to be protected, we have rangers and workers around, and poachers will hurt or do something illegal to get onto the land. So it puts the animals and the rangers and workers at risk. And then at the same time, it also causes an unbalanced ecosystem. Every animal is a part of an ecosystem. So when one animal starts to have a decline in population, then we see the ecosystem become imbalanced. And then a lot of people have confusion between poaching and hunting. So hunting is considered the killing of an animal for sport or food, and you need to have a license for hunting. So hunting, you can really only do it in regulated areas. And any endangered species is considered off the list, like you cannot kill them. So that's why hunting is really something for fun that people do in the United States and stuff. For poaching, people are using the material that they're getting from it and selling it illegally. The state of wildlife today. So pretty much there are only a few places left on the planet that us as humans haven't been to or touched in a sense. Due to our overpopulation, we are trying to grow more cities and expand to new territories because we need more things for our population. But in the end, that is causing less and less room for wildlife to roam. We are causing wildlife to be under threat from many different kinds of human activity, and that is exactly as I showed in the last slide, where poaching is happening. We're destroying habitats, And by us doing that, we're spreading disease and pretty much just hatred towards these ecosystems. So by us doing it, ecosystems are facing multiple threats. So pretty much ecosystems, we all are running together in one big ecosystem. What happens to one thing will affect another. So even though it may not seem like killing an elephant in Africa will affect us, it actually does, because it's hurting that ecosystem there, which will come over and eventually affect us. So as we're affecting, all ecosystems are being affected just by one mistake. And then that's pretty much it for the state of wildlife. But we do have a video that is pretty much explaining like why you should care about the extinction. And yeah, hope you enjoy.
Meet the pygmy hippo. They live in Africa and they are too stinking cute. Like this little one. Oh my god, look how adorable he is! Too bad these guys are dying out. Yep, they're endangered. There's only about 2,000 or 3,000 of them left in the wild. Mainly because, you guessed it, as usual, humans are screwing something up. We're clear cutting and logging their habitat. If they all die, the species will be gone forever. In a word, extinct. The pygmy hippo story isn't unique. There are lots of endangered species that environmentalists have been urging, imploring, just begging us to protect for years. They use all kinds of different tactics. They pull on our heartstrings and show us how cute and sad these little animals are. They appeal to our fears. Stop clear-cutting rainforests. One of those plants might cure cancer. And they tap into our selfish side. Like, if you don't save the coral reefs, you'll never be able to see these majestic places in person and take the perfect selfie. But despite all this, species go extinct all the time. Check out this giant list of extinct species, like the Caribbean monk seal, the Yangtze river dolphin, and the St. Helena earwig. So why should we care if a species goes extinct? I mean, does anyone really miss the St. Helena earwig? Wait, what is it? What's an earwig, Lauren? Oh, that? Okay, so throughout Earth's history, scientists know of 5 mass extinctions. This is when a ton of life on Earth got wiped out. The most recent happened about 65 million years ago when the dinosaurs all died off. But scientists are estimating we're in the middle of the 6th mass extinction right now, where species are dying out at crazy high rates. Some estimates range from 1,000 to 10,000 times higher than normal. And for the most part, we humans are to blame. We humans tend to destroy nature so we can live with all our luxurious modern conveniences like electricity, indoor skydiving, food trucks, and airplanes. I mean, pretty much anything and everything awesome. And saving endangered species can be a huge pain and super expensive. It can mean big sacrifices on our part, like, not building that awesome indoor skydiving building where these wetlands are. And it can be especially hard in developing countries. I mean, how do you tell people whose very livelihood depend on poaching or hunting endangered species to stop? Like in areas in Mexico where jobs are hard to come by, so people end up selling endangered sea turtle eggs, even at the risk of getting caught and spending 9 years in prison. In a lot of places, this could be a life or death choice. So is trying to save these endangered species really worth it? Well, there are of course moral and ethical arguments to save species, like all life has a right to be here, or that we owe it to our grandchildren to preserve species so that they can also see them in the wild. And let's be honest, when it comes to saving species, some of us are more inclined to care about the oh so cute and adorable ones, like these panda bears or these sand kittens, and it may be harder to get on board saving this weird looking salamander called an olm. Ew. I'm not against saving it, but it is ugly. But moral reasons aside, there are practical reasons we should care. Our very survival could depend on it. You see, living things in an ecosystem depend on each other, and the disappearance of one species can have big impacts on the whole thing. A lot like how a Jenga tower depends on each block and becomes more unstable as pieces are removed and rearranged. As long as it wasn't me. Take the cute cuddly sea otter. They live in kelp forests and oceans and eat sea urchins. In the early 1900s, they were hunted almost to extinction because they made luxurious and fashionable fur coats. That is before wearing a fur became like a social taboo. And when the sea otter populations dropped, the sea urchin population surged, eating up all the kelp and destroying the kelp forest. And if you're thinking, so what? I've never even heard of a kelp forest. First of all, kelp forests are these crazy cool underwater forests made of these like giant seaweed type structures. And secondly, they're crucial to the overall health of the ocean. And we benefit a lot from them. They provide habitat, food, and breeding grounds for a lot of marine life, including some tasty seafoods you might like lobster, crab, and rockfish. we're getting something to eat after this, right? For sure. Kelp forests can also protect coastal areas from flooding due to storm surges, and they make for some pretty cool scuba and snorkeling spots. Not to mention, kelp is in a lot of beauty products like shampoo. The list goes on. So right about now, you should be starting to feel sad about the sea urchins destroying this cool habitat. But don't worry, this story has a happy ending. Sea otter hunting was outlawed, and so now the sea otter population is back on the rise, though some populations are still endangered. And kelp forests are just one example of an ecosystem. There's forests, grasslands, deserts, you get what I'm talking about. And each one of these ecosystems helps us out by providing unique benefits like food, water, and natural resources. These benefits are collectively known as ecosystem services. Think of ecosystem services as pretty much the opposite of your internet company's customer service. Ecosystems actually help you out while internet companies will put you on hold for days. Did y'all just hang up on me? But back to ecosystems. They are healthiest when there are lots of different kinds of species in them. So when we start to kill off a species, that ecosystem starts to get shaky. Kind of like that Jenga tower. And sometimes it's hard to predict how the loss of one species will impact an ecosystem until it's gone. And then it may be too late. So given all this, we're curious. How much are you willing to sacrifice to preserve a species? Take for example the Amazon rainforest where white-cheeked spider monkeys are endangered because of clear cutting for cattle pastures. Like, would you give up that burger whose meat came from that region? So how do you decide how far you're willing to go to help out that endangered species? Let us know in the comments below. Thanks for watching, guys. Oh, before I leave, if you like this video, be sure to check out this totally unrelated video of ours about how teen blood could be the next anti-aging fad. Speaking of cute, weird animals, have y'all heard of Deep Look? Check out their channel. They've got a bunch of awesome close-ups of animals doing crazy things. I mean, it'll creep you out sometimes and, it makes me squirmish, but like in a cool, good way, I guess. Anyway, I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching, guys.
So now that you've watched the video, I thought it was a good time to talk about ecosystem. So pretty much an ecosystem is considered a community of animals, plants, or anything that sustain themselves in the same area or environment by performing the activities of living, feeding, and reproducing in that area. So animals have their own type of ecosystem. So we have our own here. So we all interact with every bird, insect, stuff like that around us. We're all around the same ecosystem. And this is important because every aspect of an ecosystem is dependent on all other aspects of the ecosystem. So when one part is affected, all the other parts of the ecosystem suffer. So this is really shown for our ecosystem is with bees. Bees are actually becoming extinct, and bees are known for pollinating our crops. And as our populations get bigger, we need more and more crops. But we see that pollination results in 75% of our crops being grown. But as bees continue to become more and more extinct, we're losing our amount of crop production, which is very important to our own survival. So that means we pretty much need to protect our ecosystem and what's involved in it as much as possible. So one of the things that was put in place to help with endangered species is called the Endangered Species Act. It was created by President Nixon in 1972. He pretty much declared that by adding this Conservation Act, it will help with the extinction rate of animals. So he hoped that it would help recover plants and protect different ecosystems that certain animals needed to survive. The act was passed by Congress on December 23rd, 1973. And due to this act being passed, over 95% of the animals listed as endangered under the act are still alive and improving populations. This act is continuously regulated by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and the National Marine Fisheries Service. So pretty much the act had two different types of names for things. The animals were either listed as endangered or threatened. So if it was considered endangered, it was a species now in danger of being extinct, while threatened is a species that will likely become extinct in the future or endangered in the future. So they made pretty much a huge list of animals, and they explained whether each animal type was endangered or threatened. And then also there was a list of habitats, because habitats were the one thing that was able to stay to help these animals continue to grow. So if a habitat housed pretty much an endangered or threatened animal, it was listed as a critical habitat, which would be considered a specific area with biological and physical features that are essential for certain animal survival. So by creating this act in 1973, we were able to help put kind of like a plateau in the extinction of animals, but there have been some issues with the Endangered Species Act in the past couple of years that we will be explaining in a future slide.
Now I'm going to be talking about the different kinds of animals affected due to increasing extinction rates. These animals are considered to be the most endangered animals in the world and are on the verge of being almost extinct. Firstly, the Bornean orangutan has had a 60% decrease since the 1950s, and it is estimated that their population will fall by an additional 22% in around 8 years' time. Next, the Illipica has a population of less than 1,000 due to habitat loss from climate change. Next, we have the giant otter, who are known to be the rarest otters in the world, with only about a few surviving in South Africa. And these animals are mainly hunted for their fur, which hugely affects and worsens their chance of remaining on this planet. Now, moving on to the Amur leopard, who are also among the most endangered animals in the cat family. There is currently only about 60 of them left due to the threats they face from poaching and climate change as well. Next, there is the black forest ferret, with less than 500 surviving due to the human population growth. The Darwin's fox is also threatened by human hunting and bigger predators as well. These are the last three we are going to go over. The Sumatran rhinoceros are known for being the smallest rhinos and are threatened due to poaching for their horns. Next, the Sumatran elephants has a loss of population due to poaching for ivory and also because of habitat loss. Lastly, the pangolins are threatened by poachers for their meat and scales. Now we are going to show a video about what is pushing tigers towards extinction.
The tiger, the largest of the big cats, is also the most endangered. The population of wild tigers has declined more than 95% in the past century. What's driving tigers toward extinction? And can we save them? Fewer than 4,000 tigers remain in the wild. The current decline in tigers is primarily driven by poaching to feed a demand for tiger parts in China. International trade in tigers was banned in 1987. Yet, lack of enforcement and a growing demand has only made the situation worse. Sophisticated criminal syndicates transport tigers and their parts across international borders. These gangs are part of a multi-billion-dollar illegal wildlife trade. Tiger parts are sold for use in traditional Chinese medicine, from the nose, erroneously believed to treat epilepsy, to the tail, used to treat skin diseases. And nearly every body part in between has been used to treat various other maladies. These purported natural remedies date back at least 1,000 years. And it's not just health, but also wealth that's driving the demand. Tiger bone wine has become a luxury good among China's growing elite, selling for up to hundreds of dollars a bottle. The product is made by steeping a tiger's bones in rice wine. Some believe drinking the resulting elixir will cause them to gain the tiger's strength. To meet growing demand for tiger bone wine, China established its first tiger farm in 1986. A tiger farm is a facility that breeds tigers like livestock. Today, there are hundreds of tiger farms and other captive facilities across China, Southeast Asia, and South Africa, many of which are suspected of being involved in commercial trade. These facilities house as many as 8,000 tigers. That's roughly double the number in the wild. So, why are wild tiger numbers still declining? Most conservationists agree that tiger farms simply drive up demand for tiger parts. Also, some consumers believe medicine made from wild tigers to be more potent than that from captive-bred tigers. Many tiger farms double as tourist attractions. Tourists can take part in the latest trend, photos with tigers and tiger cubs. But these encounters are far from harmless. To meet tourists' demand for cubs, tigers on farms are speed-bred. Newborns are taken from their mothers soon after birth so the females can more quickly produce another litter. In the wild, tiger cubs stay with their moms for about 2 years. When farm tiger cubs grow up, they're slaughtered for their parts. One popular tourist attraction in Thailand, the Tiger Temple, made headlines when an investigation found it was essentially operating as a tiger farm. The temple opened in 1999, claiming to be taking in orphaned tigers. It quickly ballooned into a $3 million a year enterprise with busloads of tourists paying to pet tigers and bottle feed cubs. In 2016, Thai authorities discovered that the temple had been breeding tigers without a license. All 137 of the temple's tigers were seized. During the raid, authorities also discovered tiger parts and 40 dead tiger cubs. The Tiger Temple incident may have spurred the international community to take more concrete steps to prevent wild tigers from going extinct. CITES, the treaty that regulates international wildlife trade, now requires all countries with captive Asian big cats to report on how they are ensuring the cats and their parts don't enter the illegal trade. And it's not too late to save tigers. Beliefs in traditional medicine are fading as the younger generation in China moves toward more modern, evidence-based medicine. Also, tigers are a resilient species. Females typically give birth to 6 to 8 cubs in their lifetime. Large areas of suitable tiger habitat still remain, and they have the potential to support over 20,000 tigers. Experts agree that if demand for tiger parts can be curbed and tigers can be protected in the wild, tigers may be able to rebound. For the latest news on tiger conservation and other wildlife issues, check out National Geographic's Wildlife Watch.
Some solutions we found in order to help this problem are to firstly educate family and friends about endangered species in the area. Next, recycle and buy sustainable products. Grow native plants in order to provide food and shelter for native wildlife because local species rely on local plants. Next would be to reduce water consumption, reduce your personal footprint, do not buy plastic products, do not purchase from companies that are known polluters. And lastly, another solution would be to volunteer to protect wildlife in the area by simply educating visitors at certain parks or wildlife refuges or picking up litter. Like Amanda stated earlier, we are going to be talking about the Endangered Species Act a little bit more in depth. This law protects species native to the U.S. in several ways, such as prohibiting the harming or killing of endangered species. It also bans the import and export of endangered species, and it requires protection for land and water vital to a species recovery, as well as necessitates the development and implementation of recovery plans for listed species who are going extinct. An upsetting article we came across while conducting research on the Endangered Species Act was about a time in 2019, which is fairly recent, when the U.S. significantly weakened this conservation law and made it harder to protect wildlife from the multiple threats posed by climate change. The new rules would make it easier to remove a species from the endangered list and weaken protections for threatened species. In order for them to now see if a species warrants protection, regulators will be allowed to conduct economic assessments. This will make it more difficult for regulators to factor in the effects of climate change on wildlife when making those decisions, because those threats don't tend to be immediate and usually take a while. The revised rules appear very likely to clear the way for new mining, oil, and gas drilling, as well as development in areas where protected species live. With that being said, next we have a video on why you should care about endangered species.
This week, President Trump officially declared war on wildlife. The Trump administration has taken aim at the strongest tool we have to protect plants and animals from going extinct, the Endangered Species Act. Since 1973, when President Richard Nixon signed the Endangered Species Act into law, it has been credited with preventing 99% of species in its care from going extinct. 99%! What other law or government program, or anything for that matter, has a 99% success rate? The Endangered Species Act is why we still have bald eagles, Florida manatees, grizzly bears, and gray wolves out in the wilderness, and not just stuffed in a display case in some museum. Scientists say that since it was enacted, the Endangered Species Act has stopped more than 200 species from completely dying off. But earlier this year, a United Nations report warned that we are in the midst of an extinction crisis. 145 scientists and experts from 50 countries contributed to the report. They sounded the alarm that in the next few years, human activities could lead to the die-off of more than 1 million species. And this doesn't only affect plants and animals. Bees and other pollinators are responsible for the production of a full third of the world's food. Rare plants and herbs that indigenous communities have used for millennia, the benefits of which Western medicine is only beginning to understand, have led to major scientific and medical breakthroughs. Old-growth forests provide habitat for many endangered and threatened species, and they also clean the air and sequester vast amounts of carbon dioxide, keeping the world from warming at a faster rate. The very health of the natural world that we all rely on for food, medicine, clean water, clean air, and strong economies is dependent on biodiverse, functioning ecosystems. The Endangered Species Act is there to make sure the most vulnerable in that vast web of life do not slip through the cracks. Yet, instead of producing bold and visionary ideas to further protect plants and animals, the Trump administration is doing the exact opposite, cutting giant holes in the last safety net we have to prevent widespread extinction. So, who benefits from what is essentially Trump's extinction plan? Powerful, polluting industries. Oil and gas, logging, mining, and industrial agriculture will be the beneficiaries of weakened enforcement of the Endangered Species Act. And the mastermind behind all this is Interior Secretary David Bernhardt, a former lobbyist who's worked for many of those very same industries. So, how do they benefit exactly? The administration has made 5 major changes to how it enforces the Endangered Species Act. Number 1, money is now a factor. Under the existing law, decisions to protect species must be solely based on science. Under Trump and Bernhardt's rules, economic considerations will now be injected into the decision-making process for the first time. This violates the very language and purpose of the law. Number 2, the new regulations allow for protected species to slowly slide towards extinction, so long as whatever human activity is harming them is only gradually pushing them to the brink. Number 3, the new regulations allow federal agencies to rely on empty promises from industries to minimize harm to protected species. Previously, when an industrial activity caused harm to an endangered species, the industry had to show measurable, enforceable actions to mitigate whatever activity is causing harm. Now, industry can just yada 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 through that process. Number 4, the new rules allow for the gradual destruction of forests, plains, grasslands, and rivers that these species need to survive. Over time, this will mean fewer places for threatened and endangered species to live. Big oil and other industries can basically just keep on keeping on without consequences from the administration. even though the places these critters need to survive are disappearing. Finally, number 5. The new regulations deprive newly listed species from automatically receiving protections against hunting, trapping, and other forms of harm. Yes, you heard that right. Even though an animal may be headed towards extinction, a threatened listing alone won't stop activities that can kill that species. So what do we do to stop this extinction plan? Well, we're going to court to use the power of the law to stop it. And there are members of Congress who are investigating what they can do to stop the administration's rollbacks. Give your senators and members of Congress a call and tell them to stop Trump and Bernhardt from slashing holes in the Endangered Species Act. Our wildlife and our future depends on it.
Every day, there are fewer places left that wildlife can call home. Protecting and preserving the habitats that wildlife need in order to survive runs parallel to protecting the future of humanity. We depend directly on natural habitats for essential, irreplaceable ecosystem services, and on key species such as pollinators, for countless needs and benefits, but indirectly on all other species for the simple reason that everything connects. Replacing natural habitats with unnatural habitats can destroy or degrade them at alarming rates, faster than they can replenish themselves. Now I'm going to be talking about more ways to reduce the extinction rates of animals by preserving habitats and wildlife. Firstly, avoid disturbing wildlife. Human interaction can cause a lot of stress on animals and can cause them to use up their energy reserves, or can cause them to abandon their breeding or resting sites. This means to use a pair of binoculars and don't remove animals from their habitats. Next, in order to reduce habitat loss and degradation, it is important to learn more about the natural habitats in your area. For example, before building on your property, learn about the natural habitats that may be affected by doing so. Also, if there is construction on your property, make sure pollutants do not run off into nearby streams or harbors. Next, tread lightly and avoid damaging wildlife habitat. This can be done by walking only on designated trails so you aren't damaging sensitive vegetation or animals. Also, don't dispose of any kinds of garbage unless in the appropriate bin. Next is to reduce pollution of streams and harbors, which can cause a wide range of health effects on animals. Another step would be to take care of injured wildlife with the help of an expert if there was a situation where you came across an injured or abandoned animal. Lastly would be to report spills of toxic waste that can harm wildlife. Another thing we wanted to talk about was how important it is to protect animals instead of killing them. A huge example of this would be The Biggest Little Farm film that we watched this semester. This movie provided a glimpse into sustainable farming and the amount of work and time it requires. The film showed the constant challenges they were experiencing, but also the moments where it was so rewarding. One important lesson from the film relating to this topic is how humans mess up nature when they try to control it. If we just leave it alone, usually things work themselves out in unpredictable ways, and I think that this is something everyone needs to take into consideration. Next, the importance of understanding ecosystems. In The Biggest Little Farm, they notice that one decision they make can have an effect on the entire local ecosystem. Also, interdependence plays a role just based on the fact of simply coexisting with other species. Lastly, some takeaways we had from The Biggest Little Farm film that relate heavily to what we have been discussing are how important it is to slow down and experience life. Also, corporate farms are bad in the sense where we try to force nature to fit our lives in our schedules. We use artificial farming techniques instead of letting nature take its course and embracing the seasonal variety of food we are fortunate enough to have. Also, we need to think about our own footprint in a new way instead of thinking, oh, I'm just one person, so what impact could I really have? Because this mindset is not good to have. Also, the idea of life and death and how they are connected. many farmers are experiencing the birth of animals and raising them as their own, just to slaughter them for food when they are older. And lastly, is to stop thinking we know more than nature and let it be. Here are our works cited links, and thank you so much for listening.